Hello and welcome to Pitt Street Research. My name is Stuart Roberts and I'm one of the co-founders of our firm. And joining me on the morning of Friday, the 10th of April 2026, actually it's the 9th of April 2026, where Mr. Justin Sharp is in Houston to talk about environmental clean technologies, where Justin is the Chief Technology Officer. Justin, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Stuart. How are you doing?
So Pitt Street Research has just put out some reasonably fresh and I hope comprehensive research on environmental clean technologies. Tell us about the technology that you've been working on for the last several years for environmental remediation related to PFAS.
Mhm. Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we had the Army Corps of Engineers approach Dr. Tor's lab at Rice University, where I was working on staff for over a year and a half and did my master's at. And they said, we're spending 9 billion taxpayer dollars to clean up PFAS around our military sites each year. And we don't want to spend that much money to just clean it up. And the way that they were doing this was just digging up the soil and moving it elsewhere. It's the only way people really know how to handle it in bulk. There's people that
At
try to
great
wash
cost
it.
to the American taxpayer as well.
Yeah, 9 billion taxpayer dollars isn't any small, sum of change nowadays. And it doesn't actually, solve the problem to just dig it up and move it elsewhere. The PFAS isn't being destroyed. You have to handle these crazy logistics of moving hazardous waste, which is what soil with PFAS in it is classified as. You can't just sell it to other construction sites or anything like that. You have to store it at these waste management sites to watch, have civil engineers watch it the rest of their lives. And what we're doing instead is trying to actually solve it in situ and actually solve and destroy the PFAS entirely. So that way it doesn't get into food supply, water supply, or anything like that. So that way we're not consuming it by the food that we eat or the water that we drink, but actually destroy it in the ground, take care of it completely, and do it on site in situ. So that way you don't have these logistics of digging up, moving the dirt all over the place
Right. So
for cost
let's define.
efficiency.
If you've been watching the news in the last few years, you may have heard of PFAS, nicknamed forever chemicals. These are chemicals with certain useful properties. They often show up in flame retardant products, for example, which is why you find them around Air Force bases, for example. And they've been around since the 50s or the 60s, I understand. But the trouble is they don't break down, and they can be hazardous once they show up in the human body, which regrettably is becoming increasingly common.
Mhm. That's right. Yeah. PFAS was actually first made in the 30s by accident. And when they discovered the water repellent and fire retardant properties of it, it became mainstream very quickly by 50s and 60s. I mean, people use it in firefighting foams. They use it in textiles and clothing that are water repellent. Your cookware, like the water repellent nonstick pots and pans, and fast food to go cups and containers, everything with it. And so it's gotten everywhere, all over the place. And while it's really good at those certain properties, it's that carbon fluorine bond that constitutes all types of PFAS is what's so detrimental to the body and acts as an endocrine disruptor and carcinogen for a lot of these different types of PFAS that are commonly used.
Right. So your solution, if I could summarize it for the layman, put a couple of electrodes in the soil and heat it up to about 1,000 degrees Celsius. And you are then able to liberate those bonds that are otherwise uncrackable.
That's right. Yeah. So we just heat it up to 1,000 degrees centigrade. And what that allows us to do is, so first I'll explain how it
Hey,
happens. So
nice work,
with
Justin. You can
these,
actually use centigrade rather than Fahrenheit, like you guys ordinarily do.
yeah, I try to be a bit cultured if I can. But yeah, so what we do is we insert these electrodes into the ground, uh, and we pass current through it. And what happens is we're able to uh, essentially heat up the ground by passing this voltage and current through, and it allows us to heat the soil within seconds to minutes up to the 1,000 degrees temperature that we want. What that allows is the carbon fluorine bond that's in PFAS actually breaks, and because it's very difficult to actually break this bond because it's so strong. Carbon fluorine is one of the strongest bonds you can have in chemistry. And when this carbon fluorine bond breaks, what happens is the fluorine will instead combine with calcium that's naturally present in the soil and becomes non-toxic natural calcium fluoride, which is how fluorine is found in nature, is these fluorine salts that are in the ground, and the carbon is just carbon. So we take this endocrine disruptor, this carcinogen to the body, and turn it into non-toxic natural byproducts in the ground in situ by just putting these electrodes in, heated to 1,000 degrees with this proprietary Flash Joule heating technology.
Right. And Flash Joule Heating brings us to the antecedents to this technology. You mentioned Professor James Tour before, legendary chemist at Rice University, where you are in Houston. So his lab came up with a way to do Flash Joule heating using carbon nanotubes, if I understood it correctly, that could achieve the raising of the temperature very quickly. That went into Metallium, ASX, MTM. You're the next kid off the block in terms of what you can do with that technology.
Yeah, there's actually been several companies that have started around Flash Joule heating, and it started with carbon nanotubes and graphene synthesis initially, and being able to actually do it in bulk and rapidly as well, because it was very difficult to make those back then. And it's a lot easier nowadays, thanks in part to Flash Joule heating. And that was one company that started as Universal Matter for making graphene with Flash Joule heating. And Metallium has come along as well that combines that with chlorine gas to do the metal separation and extraction. And now we're doing a version of it to be able to remediate PFAS that's in soil.
Right. Now, at the moment, we're building up to do our first field studies. When do you think that'll happen in the course of 2026?
I think we're looking right now at the end of this year for some of our first pilot tests. And so the sort of progression that we're at now is we've tested in the laboratory using Flash Joule heating with biochar, for example, mixed into the soil to make it conductive enough to do this Flash Joule heating. But we didn't want to do that for large commercial scale because the logistics of biochar, not only buying it, but then mixing it into soil, it just isn't very feasible at a large scale. So what we've done is we've combined a high frequency method for this electrothermal remediation process to heat the soil rapidly and lower the resistance of soil to feasibly heat it up in a reasonable time to this 1,000 degrees centigrade. And now where we're at is we're finishing up some of the final laboratory testings of this high frequency system with some more official PCBs that we're building. And then we'll be able to transfer those same electronics, the same package that's being used for the final validation in the laboratory to then be used in the pilot. So our transfer from laboratory demonstration to pilot demonstration, just a field test on small lawn tractor system, essentially to demonstrate the in situ and mobile aspect of this technology is pretty minimal in terms of scale up difficulty, and all the electronics is the same. So it's not like we need to go to this really big scale to be able to demonstrate on this pilot system. So we're looking at later this year to be able to demonstrate that.
And you say one tractor. So this is not assemble a gigantic plant to do this. We're talking something that one man or woman can drive.
That's right. Yeah, our plan in the long run is to make this essentially a modular hardware package on the electronic side. We don't want to be a big production plant or facility. All we need is just to have this modular hardware package, put it onto tractors, which is so well known in agriculture and in construction, and then bring along with it an electrode configuration that can go onto a small hydraulic press, sort of like a mounting system, kind of like the buckets, how they're interchangeable with different construction tractors or farming equipment. Essentially have one of those that can stamp the electrodes into the ground. Essentially what we're looking at is 0.5 meter max into the soil. And that's our package. We don't need to worry about the tractors. It's already out there. We don't need to worry about the hydraulics. It's already out there. For us, the main focus is just this electrical hardware system to do the Flash Joule heating.
Right. Now, for those investors who don't know you, you've had an interesting history. It's April 2026. So as we speak, the Artemis spacecraft is returning to Earth, God willing, for a successful splashdown. You spent some time at NASA as an intern while you were studying for your master's in chemistry at Rice. Instead of joining NASA, you've ended up as the chief technology officer of this startup that's publicly traded in Australia. What made you take that career decision?
Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting career course so far, for just only being a few years since starting my professional career. So when I was at NASA, it was a dream come true at the time, because I had grown up always wanting to be an astronaut and to work at NASA. I loved the internship and everything about it, and the people I got to meet, the astronauts I got to work with for trainings or habitat research and things like that. But government, if you didn't know, Stuart, moves very slowly. So it's very difficult for things to get done sometimes when you're doing research and technology development. As much as I love NASA, I sort of had the heart to move a bit quicker and move at sort of larger scales with larger sums of cash flow behind things, because that's how this stuff moves. And when I was at NASA, it took, I want to say, 5 months for a single $16,000 vacuum chamber test to get approved to do. Just one experiment took 5 months to get approved for 16 grand. And I mean, we could spend that in a day in the commercial sector and no one blinks. And if it gets something done, so being able to actually commercialize technology in the commercial sector and with this company has always sort of been a dream of mine. It just took, some other experiences to help me see that the startup route was really the way to go with that.
Right. Now, you've got some interesting friends now. ECT was capitalized by a team of investors in Perth led by Faldi Ismail, who's now the executive chairman of Environmental Clean Technologies. You've come in as chief technology officer. How are you enjoying working with us semi-criminal Aussies down here?
It's great. It's really phenomenal, Stuart. Yeah, I couldn't be happier working with the guys that I am at this company. They're all extremely welcoming and open, and they've certainly taught me a lot. Coming at this from a technical background and not as much with the business and financial background, they've really shown and taught me a lot, and sort of shown me the ropes for that, and have really given me a lot of opportunities to grow just in my background, my understanding, which I've told people makes me feel a lot more dangerous now that I have the business and financial knowledge of working in this now, along with the technical background as well. So I think that will certainly be put to good use in the future.
Right. Now, we'll close off with this. We talked before about the hideous costs that Uncle Sam is spending just to clean up his Air Force bases in your country. Give us a sense of the market opportunity just in environmental remediation for PFAS, beyond what we can do with the technology after that.
Oh man, it's astronomical. It's everywhere. I mean, if you want to go really broad, you could even look at like healthcare costs and impacts associated with PFAS contamination. And the EU just released a report recently of the estimated costs to the healthcare system for PFAS contamination in the environment just in Europe. You're looking at almost half a trillion euros by 2050. I mean, it's terrible, and that's just the healthcare system. You could look at real estate as well, and how property values just absolutely tank as soon as you have any soil that has this PFAS contamination that's in it. In the US, there's farms that are getting shut down in the Midwest where states do have regulations at the moment. So farms are losing their value, and chemical plants, if they have a contamination or a spill, they get shut down for months and months at a time because they have to clean up all of the soil that's around their plant before they can reopen. And some plants, they're losing like $1 million a day if they're shut down for some of these, just because of the startup and shutdown, costs and the labor costs that go with it, and not generating revenue from generating product. So between real estate, waste management, healthcare, and then military as well for DOW, I mean, the expanse is astronomical of the impacts of PFAS.
Right. Well, Justin Shupp, on behalf of all those people who are going to benefit from future PFAS remediation projects, thank you, and good luck for the next stage of development for environmental clean technologies.
Thanks, Stuart. I appreciate it.
Thank you. See you soon.